In our last lesson, we'll learn a technique for adding jiggle effects to a muscle object. So in this file, I've cleaned up the weights around the neck a bit more. If you find that the muscle object is kind of getting in the way, you could always add it to a layer. So what I'd do first is head over to Manage Layers and go ahead and freeze the creature. And then next we can now go to wireframe mode and select them that way. Or you could always use your select dialog. So if you press the H key, notice that's a much faster way of grabbing all of these objects. And at that point, we can create a new layer and name it Muscle. I'll make sure that the default layer is still the active one, and we can then unfreeze this layer. Okay, great. So if we were to now hide this and take a look here, see, all right, we're getting some nice volume in this creature's neck. So let's now create this jiggling effect. Now, what I've pointed out in the last lesson is we can't just add, let's say, a flex modifier directly to our muscle, because the skin modifier looks at the transform matrix of our bone object. So if there are any deformations added to that object, it will not be seen. So instead, we're going to need to design a more clever system to have this happen. And what we could do is actually tie a spring controller to our anchor points. That way, as they move, that will in turn give us that jiggle behavior that we would like to see. So let's go ahead and do just that. We'll start by adding it to the helper that's going to show us this jiggle behavior the most, and that's the second one here closest to the head. If we need to, we could go back and add one more to the one directly connected to the head, but I think we could go ahead and start here with the second one. Alright, so with that selected, we could then move to our motion panel, and underneath Assign Controllers, we can go ahead and expand this to grab our position list and assign the spring controller. Okay, great. What I'd like to do from here is change up the animation some, because as of right now, if we were to hit play, we don't quite see the jiggle too well. Alright, so let's go ahead and have the creature turn his head instead. With the head control selected, we could just go in and delete our keys, except for frame 0. Let's go ahead and turn on auto key again. Our animation layer should be active. Alright, so we can now go ahead and add some animation. Let's go ahead and make this pretty quick so we can see this jiggle behavior. So I'll go ahead and rotate the neck over on frame 10, and then rotate it in the opposite direction on frame 20. When we play this back, we should now notice a very nice jiggle in the creature's neck, which is very cool. If you wanted to see it a bit more, you could always go in and speed up your keys even further. So we hit play, here's what we end up with. Alright, great. Now because we're just working with a few frames, what I probably want to do here is remove a lot of these frames on our track bar. We could hold down Control Alt and drag with our right mouse button to do that. Great. I might add a few more, just so that there's a delay. Alright, so this is looking really cool. And at this point, we could start to edit our spring settings to get a better result. So if we start to adjust our mass at the top, as we increase this, that's going to exaggerate our bounce. So right now the bounce, it does look fleshy, but we can go ahead and improve it. Let's set this to 400 units instead of 3. So now when we hit play, the neck is a bit bouncier. Alright, next, we can go ahead and adjust the drag, and as we start to decrease this, that will in turn give us a greater bounce effect. So again, if we were to decrease this, we could start to have a feeling of loose skin. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to about 40%. Now when we go ahead and hit play, we'll now notice that the jiggle in the neck looks more fleshy. That's very fun. All right, great. So next what we could do is think about adding a force to this, adding gravity so that the neck kind of pulls down a bit, because that's what we're missing right now. So in order to do that, we can first go ahead and expand forces. See that there's nothing to add just yet. So I now want to go ahead and add this from the Create panel. We can go to Space Warps and find the gravity node. I'll press the S key and click just to make sure that it gets added right in the center here. So we could go ahead and now press S to exit our snap tool, and we're left with our gravity node. If we were to go to the Modify panel, you see that, all right, there really isn't much to change here. I think it's going to work out well. Our gravity is going to look really nice when we apply this. If we do need to edit the strength or decay, we most certainly can, but I think it's going to work out well. Let's go ahead and add this force now. So we'll choose Add, and let's select the gravity space warp. And now when we hit play, we'll notice that the neck falls a bit, as if there's gravity actually pulling it down. That's really exciting. Now I'd like to point out that if you wanted to add more of a natural feel to this, you can always go in and create yet another spring controller, this time to the other object that's in motion right now, and that is the helper directly connected to the head. So I'll go ahead and right click to exit the Add tool here. On our spring controller, I'll go ahead and close this out, and just FYI, if you'd like to get back to those options, you just go in and select the helper, head back over to your motion panel, and you can go ahead and access those attributes by right-clicking and choosing Properties. So I'll now go to this first helper here and assign another spring controller. May not be a good idea to add gravity here. We want this one pulling down, but here we kind of want that in place. We just want to offset our movement a bit so we can start to adjust our values, maybe decreasing our mass so we don't have much of a bounce. And then we could slightly decrease the drag for the same reason, so that the bounce doesn't look too rigid, but at the same time it doesn't look too fleshy, especially for where this helper lies on our muscle rig. This would need to be glued into the head rig a bit more, so we wouldn't want much movement out of that piece. But now if we were to go in and play this back, we should notice a nice natural looking offset in our neck rig, which ultimately leads to more realism. So I like to go in and start to hide all objects except for the skin, so we could take a look at this and see how well this is going to work out for animation. That's very cool. And that goes to show you that 3ds Max is a very fun application to use, and it can help us to accomplish our dreams of building stories that last a lifetime. And that's what this ultimately leads to, all of these tools that we learn. All right, so I'd like to thank you for spending time with me as we learn how to work with CAT. We've learned some really cool things about it, how to create our custom rigs, that is, and then how to save them out as presets, how to use a built-in preset if we'd like to work with that. Then we've also learned about CAT motion, and then finally we've ended with the muscle system built into CAT to create a really neat neck jiggle, and also to keep volume in the neck as it squashes and stretches.